Understandably, manufacturers greet the arrival of new models with much enthusiasm. They drum up press coverage, they take out advertising, they generate as much hype as they can. And when you're dealing with a brand like BMW and a car like the X5, the grand event becomes even more grand. So grand, in fact, that they've flown us all the way to one of South Africa's most thriving metropolises, Richards Bay. Well, that was the starting point of a round trip through Mtuba-Tuba, Hluhluwe, past St. Lucia and up to Cozy Bay and beyond. It gave us 2 days and over 1,000 kilometers to learn what this third generation X5 was about, and gave us the chance to see how well it would cope with the kinds of road surfaces that hardly any X5 owner would subject it to. It also gave us a little time to appreciate what BMW had done to update the styling for this SUV. And the answer? Not a lot that you could pick out straight away. Those subtle changes have resulted in a more subtle car. It's still big, but with a front end borrowed from a 3 Series and trimmed down rear lights, it's a much sleeker, much sexier looking thing. I was never a big fan of the X5, but this is a really good looking machine. Fitted with the optional 30,000 Rand black 20-inch rims and painted in its shade of grey, our test car looked like a well-dressed member of the board with a good suit and polished black brogues. And even though there isn't a lot of difference between the previous generation and this one, the new design still managed to get a lot of attention. The complete X5 lineup will eventually consist of 5 engines, but if you're hoping to get an xDrive30i or the 4-litre diesel, you'll have to wait. For now, your choices include the mighty triple-turbo M50D, the 5-litre V8 petrol, and this. The xDrive30d, which, like all X5s, has drive to all 4 wheels through an 8-speed auto box. BMW claims a consumption figure of 6.2 litres per 100 k's, which, on our open road drive, meant we wouldn't be interrupted by too many fuel stops. Plus, with 190 kilowatts and a respectable 560 newton meters, we were looking forward to covering the distance set out for us in a decent time. Although it turns out that it wasn't quite going to be smooth tar all the way. If you had to ask me what the natural habitat of a BMW X5 is, I'd say, well, it's obvious. It's the school or the shopping mall or the country club. And if you had to ask me what the most adventurous thing a BMW X5 driver did, I'd say, well, they'd probably load up some bikes onto the back, drive to some semi-urban bike trail and go do some biking. And BMW hate that. They're trying to convince anyone who will listen that this car doesn't mind a bit of off-roading. And to prove that point, they're taking us to the wilds of Mozambique. But they weren't waiting for us to cross the border before we got dirty. Just 70 kilometers from our start point, it was onto the gravel of northern KZN, where we got a chance to test out how well this car, so loved by suburbanites, would cope with some not very suburban conditions. Those 20-inch wheels I mentioned earlier were fitted with fairly standard road tyres, not ones that you might need should things get a little muddy. And as much as this has all the attributes of an off-roader, there are no buttons to press to set it up for conditions that aren't on-road. In fact, the only preparation it needs for you is to point the wheels to the dirt and then drive onto it. The X5 is synonymous with BMW's forays into the world of 4x4 with their xDrive system, but for this generation, they're trying something different as well. You may have heard a rumor of an X5 that's not all-wheel drive. You may have heard that it's called the xDrive, which in BMW speak means it's rear-wheel drive only. The good news is that rumor is true. The bad news is that car is not coming to South Africa, well, not anytime soon anyway. But even so, being forced to drive an all-wheel drive car isn't a bad thing, even if you never plan to go off-road. And this particular 4x4 does feel surprisingly good off-road. It even has a few gadgets to add to the experience, like a gradient scale. And despite its lack of pure off-road intent, the X5 managed a number of changing conditions, from dry, hard dirt in KZN to the soft sands of Mozambique. Sand that also got a bit wet and had us driving into a few puddles on our way in and out of the country. Our test car was fitted with the optional rear air suspension, which no doubt helped make things a little smoother, but even so, I've always been a little cynical about these big urban cruisers and their abilities, or lack thereof, in off-road conditions. And even though this wasn't exactly untamed Africa, the X5 was surprisingly good. So, can the X5 go off-road? Well, according to the roads we've seen today, yes it can. But then, to be honest, most cars with a full set of tyres and a half-decent suspension setup could handle the roads we've seen today. But that is not the point. The point is to feel how this car transfers its abilities. On the dirt, you obviously feel a lot more through the suspension and the steering, and the systems all work harder. But the car itself, even on the rougher roads that we've driven, remains confident and it remains very easy to drive. The more challenging conditions came on the way out of Mozambique, when overnight rain made the sand tracks a little bit more slippery. Add to that our decision to find our own way out on tracks that weren't as good as the previous days and our test car's road tyres, and you'd think we were in for a real struggle, but the X5 managed very well. Designing and building any car is not an easy task, but when you're designing and building an SUV, it comes with its own special considerations. It has to be big and chunky like the customers expect, but that means it's not very aerodynamic, and that in turn means it's less efficient. And efficiency these days is arguably just as important as anything else in a new car. So to get around that particular problem, BMW have turned to the dark science of aerodynamics. In front, air curtains that reduce drag by allowing air to move more easily through the wheel arch before it makes its way out through the air breathers, a prominent feature behind the front wheel arches of new BMW models. Featured for the first time on any BMW are the aero blades, plastic bits that make up part of the rear window and that help channel air to make this rather large machine as slippery as possible. With our overnight stay done, it was time to head back to the thriving metropolis of Richards Bay, and having tested the off-road abilities of our X5 a little harder than we intended to, it was time to see how well it did on the tar. I've always found the idea of a performance SUV, especially a diesel, a little bit laughable because no matter what you do to it, it's still just a big, boxy SUV. But this is a BMW and they do like fitting sport buttons to all their models. And despite my misgivings, this thing is actually very, very good. BMW are absolute masters at building suspension systems that overcome the sheer physics of the cars they create. And those same systems make sure that the chance of any driver-induced mayhem is just about zero. Short of driving it like a complete idiot, the X5 will tolerate just about anything and remain calm and composed. For regular everyday driving, it now features a whole bunch of safety systems that will help you avoid rear-end collisions, help you stay in your lane, and help you identify pedestrians, even at night. Our test car was also fitted with the optional active cruise control, which automatically keeps a set distance to the car ahead by braking and accelerating for you. It's superb for long distances. BMW are the inventors of the original digital driver interface. Their system is called iDrive, and the first generation was horrendous. Over the years, though, they've managed to improve it, and they haven't been scared to borrow ideas from other manufacturers, most notably Audi. Now, in this new generation X5, there's another one of those Audi ideas right there. First seen in the A8, the touchpad works like a laptop's mousepad, allowing handwriting recognition and easy selection of various functions. That morphed into an integrated unit on top of the rotary controller in the new generation A3. BMW likes this, and their version works just as well, no matter how much you try write like your GP. It may not be original, but it's part of what is a very comfortable cabin. Customizable if you pay for the option, spacious and well put together. The X5's interior is a superb place to be if you're heading for the border or the boardroom. Like the styling, the interior isn't a major departure from what has gone before, with the layout being very similar to the previous generation X5. Without any options, there's still the benefit of lots of space and a high level of standard spec. The automated tailgate is standard across the range, and you can opt for a third row of seats. If you balance all of that out with its off-road credentials, its size, its clearances, BMW's insistence that it can go off-road, you still come to the conclusion that the X5 is better suited to a life on tar. It's better looking, it's more advanced, and despite being bigger than average, it's still very easy to live with, and it is a very good drive. BMW's 3-litre diesel never fails to disappoint, and it's the same in the new X5. With good power and responses, it's the engine for all applications. The new X5 has more safety and more technology. It's great on the open road and will even handle some rough conditions with surprising ability. There's not a lot to dislike in this package.